Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope all of you are having a great day so far, or evening, or whatever time of day you're listening to the podcast. This is episode number 3 of this wonderful new venture, Bleav in Boston Betting, with your host, Shukri Wright. I'm excited to have the following guests here with me on this episode. Andy MacNeil, hockey betting analyst at VSiN. You can follow him on Twitter at Digital Gambler, as well as check out the VSiN website and subscribe. So like they have like a lot of really good content in terms of hockey gambling bets, especially if you're a Bruins fan and along the likes and so forth. But the more seasoned pro at this is here with me today, Andy MacNeil. Thank you for having me on the podcast and joining me on the podcast, rather. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Shukri. It's a pleasure to be on here, and congratulations on the new gig, man. I'm sure it's going to go great.
I appreciate that. Thank you immensely, so much. Let's start with last night's game. what a wild west shootout it was in Ottawa against the Senators, in which the Bruins fall 7-5. What are your initial thoughts on the game, and as well as what went wrong for the Bruins after they were able to come back from the 3-goal deficit?
Well, first of all, full transparency here. I made a terrible bet on the Boston Bruins in their game against the Ottawa Senators. And
how bad was it?
Not necessarily because they lost, but because I didn't do a good job of reading the betting market like I typically do. I bet the Bruins around even money, meaning you bet $1 or you win $1 for every dollar that you bet. And they actually moved the other way. So you could have got a much more attractive price later on in the day. And I guess for good reason, right? The market was pretty right on that one. That oftentimes you hear the public this and the public that, and they don't know anything about betting. But I think it's important to kind of understand how the markets work and just how important maybe the wisdom of the crowd is. And last night I was against it, and it looked like I made the wrong choice. Boston looked really slow from the start. They may have stayed out late celebrating Jake DeBrusk's birthday the night before. I don't know. It's they sure looked like it. Anyways, they looked really slow. They certainly didn't look as good as they looked in their first 3 games, where the offense was, early and often. It took a little while for them to get going last night. I think what kind of Bruins fans can probably take away from the game against the Senators is that they were on the back-to-back. It is early in the season, and sometimes those back-to-back situations are a little tougher before you've got, reacclimated to the rigors of the NHL schedule, right? And I think that really caught the Bruins a little bit off guard. So the season, I think they'll clean those areas up. I think they'll perform a lot better in those situations when they are tired. They should fairly well, I think, given that they have 2 confident goaltenders, or at least they should have 2 confident goaltenders. Linus Ullmark was fantastic against the Florida Panthers, the night before they played Ottawa. But Swayman, he needs to pick it up after last season, in which he kind of probably fell out of favor, I guess, with the team. Ullmark was probably the better goaltender in the latter half of the season. So, there's a lot to take away from the game against the Senators, but I think it was a tough spot. And as the season goes on, I think the Bruins will carry themselves a little better in those situations.
Like, why did you think that you made a terrible bet in terms of the game against the Senators last night? Because going into it, I was actually feeling pretty good. In terms of just the overall optics. This is a team that has been rolling through the first 3 games, and that they've gotten scoring contribution up and down the lineup from all 4 lines. Why did you think that it was such a bad bet that you made last night?
Well, this is a little bit of betting 101, I guess, at the same time. Or I shouldn't say it's 101. It's a little bit more advanced than betting 101. But it was like I said, it had nothing to do with the fact that the Bruins lost. It had everything to do with that I could have gotten better odds on the bet that I made later on in the day. I was eager. I felt pretty good about the Bruins too. I thought the market would agree with me. I thought that, hey, I've got this game figured out here, and the rest of the, betting world is going to agree with me, and they're going to think the Bruins are the better bet here as well. But Some people with enough money to move the odds around thought differently, and they bet the Senators. So, I don't mind going against that kind of, that movement in the market where the odds really shift in the other direction. But I'd like to be on the other side of it where I'm actually getting the good odds, not betting the game and then seeing the odds move against me in the wrong direction, if you know what I mean.
Oh, absolutely. I totally get that. And as the Bruins have their off day on the day of the recording, they have their next game coming up next against Anaheim, in which that I am really curious as I look at the current odds right now. The Bruins right now puck line is a -1.5. What does that mean exactly for like the novice bettor that's getting into hockey betting for the first time? Would that be a good bet to make if you're a Bruins fan on the game, considering that they're at the under 6.5 right now at +105?
Okay, so what that means, I mean, the reason the point spread in football was created was to kind of present bettors with a 50-50 proposition, because if you've got the best team in the league playing the worst team in the league, the odds are going to be lopsided. So they had to install that handicap, to say 14.5 points. If they can stay within that margin, then it's a 50-50 bet kind of. They've got the same sort of thing in hockey, but it's the puck line, but it's still the same idea as the point spread, except it doesn't drift away from -1.5. You can find alternate lines of 2.5 and 3.5 and whatever, but it just means that the favorite, the team with the minus in front of their 1.5, has to cover the game by 2 goals at least. So they've got to win by 2 or more. And the other team, the team that's the underdog, they'll only have they can still cover a puck line bet if they lose the game, but they can't lose by more than 1 goal. You've got to stay within that 0.5, right under that, if you're on the plus side. So they are sometimes good bets. I would say that a lot of people look at them in probably the wrong way. They see the Bruins like Boston is a relatively sizable favorite, I guess you would say, on in their next game versus Anaheim, but and that might make some Bruins fans feel a little bit uncomfortable when it comes to betting them. They might not want to lay that -185 or -190 or whatever's floating around out there on money line bet, so that they have to bet $1.90 just to win $1 for the Bruins to win the game, and that might not be very appealing to them. So they'll look and say, oh, well, if I bet the Bruins to win by at least 2 goals, I've only got to bet $1.15 to win $1, and that's a lot more attractive. But I'd say when it comes to stuff like that, you really only bet the puck line when you're a novice bettor and you're kind of just starting out. You should really only bet the puck line when you really love a team. It's actually in the games when you're looking and saying, you know what, the Bruins they're playing the Penguins tonight. They've lost a couple in a row. I really think they're gonna. I'm just making this up as I go along, obviously. Yeah. I really think they're gonna bounce back tonight and get a win. Maybe it's a close game as far as the odds are concerned, and that means the puck line in those situations might pay somewhere around 2-1. So don't necessarily stick your nose up at those longer shot puck line bets, which I think a lot of people do, and they opt to take it. Oh, Boston's a big favorite on the money line tonight, I'm going to take them on the puck line instead. And that doesn't always work out. In fact, they lost both of their games versus Anaheim last season. So, I'm sure a lot of people took that strategy when they faced off against the Ducks in 2021-22, and it didn't work out.
It's interesting how you were able to like go back to last season and use that as an example, how basically new bettors and those that are new to like sports betting use those examples from the 2 games in which the Bruins faced off against the Ducks from last season in terms of making I guess the best educated decision possible based on the information that they know. Now, from betting to just the overall X's and O's of the Boston Bruins to start the 2022-2023 season, one of the things that stood out to me so far is is the check line. That second line for the Bruins has really been a story because none of us truly knew what we were going to realistically get from David Krejci, who came back to the States to play in the NHL after spending a year playing in the Czech Republic. What has stood out to you so far in terms of what are some of the early season impressions on what the Bruins have been able to do so far?
Well, it's funny, you know. I'm a Bruins fan, and always have been. And obviously, Krejci was great, specifically in the 2011 Stanley Cup run. He led the team in points, as you know, and I'm sure everybody else listening knows as well. But I don't think I'm the only Bruins fan that like wanted him for several years. It was just kind of like I mean, it's easy for me to sit on my couch or in my recliner and judge an NHL player and critique his abilities, but I always knew that he was a good player, but it just seemed those last, after that Stanley Cup run and sometimes it just seemed like he wasn't really as much or up to the task as much as some of the other guys like, Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, et cetera, right? And I thought he was sort of overpaid, but the second that he left, I wanted him back. And now that he's back and he's playing the way he is, I'm super happy that Krejci's back and is a member of the Boston Bruins again. I love the look of the Czech line. I hope that they can continue to, play the way they have when the Bruins are back at full strength, when Marchand and McAvoy come back and whatnot. It would be really great to be able to, run not only two lines, but three lines steady and have some offensive punch on all of those lines. With a guy like Taylor Hall maybe down on the third line, right? I don't know. It's interesting, but I think the thing that's most intriguing to me about the Bruins this season, outside of the possibilities of what's going to happen when McAvoy and Marchand come back, and just what the Bruins defense will look like when McAvoy and Lindholm can really play big minutes together on a nightly basis. And I'm excited to see what that's going to do for Charlie McAvoy, because I think he's been kind of beat up these last few years, just kind of bearing a lot of the responsibility at both ends on his own. So I think the big thing that stands out is just the intrigue that's in the bottom six. I'm not a big Trent Frederic guy. I mean, you love the snarl and whatnot and the attitude, but sometimes, like last night, he takes stupid penalties and it's really can cost the team. So that's he's not very high on my list, but I love what I've seen out of AJ Greer. Jacob Loco is a really interesting player. The Bruins have lacked speed in the last couple of years. They haven't been able, like Tampa Bay and other teams have found these undervalued players that have filled roles in their bottom six and, been meaningful contributors in playoffs and whatnot. And Boston just hasn't been able to find that. And you've seen a number of guys kind of recycled over the last few years, just Eric Holla. I'm trying to think of some other people, but guys like that just came through and they hoped that they could maybe be those players, but they weren't. Yeah. Maybe we have that in AJ Greer and Jacob Loco this season. So that's interesting. And I think that's the biggest thing that stands out to me, other than their overall play, which has been pretty good.
Absolutely. Just want to take a quick break to read you some of the information on VSiN. First and foremost, VSiN is a sports betting network, the first 24/7 broadcast network dedicated to exclusively sports betting. Visit VSiN.com/NHL for the hockey betting news and analysis to help inform your wagering decisions. And as far as the 2022-2023 hockey betting guide is concerned, you can check that out now at VSiN.com/subscribe. The digital guide features the in-depth preview for all 32 teams across the NHL, tips for NHL bettors, and as well as stabs, Stanley Cup odds, point total projection, schedule analysis, and more. All of that is available if you go to VSiN.com/subscribe and check out Andy MacNeil's work there as well, which he does a terrific job of, on all things NHL, including the Boston Bruins as well. Now, in terms of going back to the Bruins, you said something towards the end of your explanation in terms of the overall view of the team so far in the early going. And the thing that stood out to me was in terms of Trent Frederic. And for those of you that are listening or watching this podcast know that I have been critical of Trent Frederic at times. Like, he takes bad penalties at the worst spots in games, which like last night was another prime example, although like he wasn't the only problem, but it just seemed as if that he just allows his emotion to get in the way. Am I crazy, Andy?
No, I think there's one thing that I don't know what the solution is, and this is just something I've kind of looked at as from the perspective of a fan over the last number of years, is I think a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a good number of players in the NHL and probably all sports that lack like emotional intelligence, being able to that doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means they are not able to, kind of deal with their emotions in a intelligent way. I'm guilty of it. I'm sure we all are at certain times, and there's a lot of intensity in the game, and I would never be able to even, I've played sports and I've been in competitions, but at that level, I'd never be able to even, kind of think about or even imagine what those guys go through on a nightly basis and what the intensity is like out there. But just going back to the Ottawa game with Frederick, and I don't know, it was a weird penalty, but the puck was nowhere near to Brinket when he took him off his feet, and if it was near him, it wasn't ever on his stick at any point. So I think it was a dumb penalty at a bad time. Like, you're down 2-0, like, go out there and send a message in a different way. Like, you've got to have that security to know that, like, I can affect positive change in the game with my physical presence, but I have to toe that line, and like, you can cross that line sometimes, and like, I mean, I'm not saying that it's good to go out and injure anybody or be an idiot purposely, but like, when there are certain points in certain games where it's okay to maybe cross the line a little bit and send a real message to the other team that, like, you're not going to be messed with or whatnot. But when you're losing, you're down 2-0. The offense should be your biggest priority, especially when you didn't really show up to play, right? I mean, it would be different if the game had gotten out of hand for another reason, because of maybe Ottawa taking liberties with some players or whatever, right? But it wasn't that type of game, and the Bruins simply didn't show up. So I thought it was a little bit childish and immature to go that route so early in the game when you're facing a deficit already.
Absolutely. And in terms of looking at the long-term odds, the Bruins odds to win the Stanley Cup in 2023 are plus 1,500. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say that I would sooner bet them, and I don't know how things have changed here. Just let me look up really quick.
Absolutely.
I would sooner bet them, I think. Ooh, that hurts. That took a big move here. The Boston Bruins odds to win the Atlantic Division, which I thought was a good bet in the 2022-23 NHL VSiN betting guide, where I break down all my projections and share my best kind of futures bets. The Bruins to win the Atlantic Division was one that I shared at 11-1. Now they're 4-1 to win the Atlantic Division, and that's not all that appealing at that number, given that there's still some pretty good teams that they're going to be fighting against, and it's early. But no, I was going to say that I would sooner bet the Bruins to win the Atlantic Division than the Stanley Cup, but it looks like both their Stanley Cup odds and their odds of winning the division have really improved over the last few days.
Like, how did the odds go from 11-1 to 4-1? Like, what?
Man, hype. the hockey market is so fickle, right? I mean, like, I should say the futures betting market is really fickle. I mean, like, something can really shift things because there's no real way to correct it. It's not like you can go place a bet on the other 31 teams to win the Stanley Cup, right? I mean, so people see the Bruins starting hot. They see the Maple Leafs starting like crap, losing to Montreal and Arizona. They see Florida not looking so hot, losing Ekblad for a long time, apparently. They see the Lightning kind of stumbling out of the gate, losing the Flyers after blowing a 2-0 lead, losing to the Rangers on opening night in pretty whatever the opposite of dominant fashion is.
Lopsided, you could say.
Exactly, right. So I mean, I think it's early, and in a week everything could change. The Bruins could suck and everybody else could be good. That's how hockey goes sometimes. I mean, injuries, whatever. this hot start and the kind of mediocre or poor start for a lot of other teams. I think it has a lot of people probably running to bet the Bruins if they knew they're around 10-1 or 8-1. Sometimes these things almost get overcorrected because they're not a reaction beginning, but then once a team wins 3 or 4 games in a row and people start to say, "Oh, look," then there's almost like a rush and an overcorrection, I would say, and maybe that's what we're looking at here. I think 4-1 is a little bit too high. I mean, they're low odds, but they're a little bit too high. I think it's it's going to be a tough division to win, obviously, with those teams I mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said going into the season, the Atlantic was going to be a challenge. There was nothing that would indicate that the division was going to be handed to the Bruins just because. And I've talked about it towards the end of last season, during the summer, even leading into the season, in which that I said, the Rangers are going to be a problem. And of course, there were a couple of Bruin fans that were like, yeah, okay, whatever. Rangers, like, you're not paying attention. That Ranger team in New York got even better, even with the signing of Vincent Trocheck. And I've had the chance to watch all of the games so far this season. And what has impressed me more than anything is a couple of things. Number one, I don't think there's any reason to debate as to who's the best goaltender in the world right now. At one point, it was Andrew Vasilevsky. I still think he's top 2. But for me, it's a clear number 1, Igor Shesterkin. That's first and foremost. And then number 2, you talk about the speed element, not just from the forwards, but from the defensemen as well on that team. And you compare that with the Bruins, it's scary how it's almost night and day, because the Bruins are not looked at as a team that relies on speed to generate offense. So I'll ask you, in terms of the competition within the Atlantic division, what is one team for you that you would be the most concerned about? Although the season is very young, no one's running away from the division through 4 games. But who was the one team in the division that concerns you, and why?
I mean, I think the teams are all fairly close, to be honest. Like, I think I foolishly, I guess, had Toronto projected to win the division. They're just a really great team, top to bottom, and then you get to the goaltending, and it really scares you. But
yeah,
I know that the perceived character issues of the team, I guess, whatever you want to call them, the softness of the team, whatever. Fact remains, they've been a really good regular season team, so that holds weight when you're making predictions on who's going to be the best team in the regular season, because they have been one of the best regular season teams, and it doesn't really matter that they haven't won a playoff round when you're talking about who's going to be the best team in the regular season. So yeah, Toronto is a team that still worries me a bit, but I think what has happened here early, you're kind of seeing worst case scenario with Matt Murray going down to injury. Now they're relying on Ilya Samsonov and Eric Kallgren, the third string goaltender, for I don't know how long. Not that Murray is going to be the savior of that team for sure, but I mean, and you've always got to worry about the Florida Panthers. They were the best offensive team in 26 seasons. Toronto was the second best, but Florida was the best offensive team in 26 seasons last year. They lost a lot with Huberdeau and Weegar leaving, and also Mason Marchment, sorry, out as well. He's in Dallas now. Had a couple of big games, I Bleav. So they're not as deep now, and their goaltending is concerning. But there's just a lot of teams in that division that can run and gun. I'm not worried about the Senators yet. I'm really not. I think they're going to miss the play. They're going to make the playoffs, maybe 1 out of every 5 times, maybe a little bit higher. I don't know. We'll find out over the next few weeks just how real of a team they are. But and Buffalo, Buffalo. I think a good friend of mine, Michael Lieboff, made this point on actually an NHL.com podcast recently, and he talked about how he thought Buffalo could be that fill that void as like the scrappy underdog team, not necessarily one that makes the playoffs, but the team that comes up nowhere, has some young talent, wins some games that they're not supposed to, and maybe is a intriguing bet because of that. Like last night, they were, I Bleav around a 2-1 underdog against the Edmonton Oilers, and they won that game. So, there's it's a tougher division. I think I would say I'm worried about the entire division more as a whole this season than I have been in the past couple of seasons.
I think it's legitimately very fair when you talk about just the talent level from like the 3 or 4 other teams, like the Panthers, the Lightning, the Rangers, and I mean, I would even say, I mean, the Flyers, although it's very early, but the Flyers was kind of showing me a little bit of something in terms of, does the head coach make that big of a difference in terms of a cultural change? I mean, let's face it, John Tortorella he's a lightning rod, for God's sakes. And we all know what his pedigree is, what he was able to accomplish throughout his coaching career. But this is someone that the Flyers hired during the summer and said, we need someone that's going to shake up things in the locker room. And just a few days ago, and I would love your thoughts on this, you heard a quote of him basically saying that
they don't have anything good.
There you go. Take it over, Andy.
Oh, it was so funny. It was just so funny, though. It was just he is such like, thank you, Philadelphia Flyers, for hiring John Tortorella. Like, I know they keep saying that these old coaches have to stop being recycled and whatnot. You know, we need some new blood in the game and younger. And I Bleav that as well. But like, let's keep recycling John Tortorella for at least a little while longer, because he is pretty entertaining. Like, when he was asked by a reporter, have you found anything about this team, any good qualities, anything you could build on? And he, like, without hesitation, no. Right. And that was before the season started. To a 3-0 start. You know, I mean, give credit where credit is due. They've won hockey games. Not only have they won 3 hockey games, but they've overcome multi-goal deficits in the last 2 to win against, you know, teams that a lot of people thought were going to be pretty good, I guess. Vancouver, Tampa Bay, obviously. But I don't think, like, the Flyers are playing very simple hockey. They've got some injuries. We don't know how long Sean Couturier is going to be out. I think the prognosis is maybe a little bit more positive now. I'm not really sure. To be honest, like, I guess I really worry myself too much until it sounds like a guy is going to come back into the lineup. Obviously, from the perspective of a long-term forecast, it helps to have that a little better of an idea. But right now, it's kind of the day-to-day predictions, right? So everything depends on how long Sean Couturier is out. Cam Atkinson's hurt right now. Owen Tippett has missed a couple of games, I Bleav. So big reason why the Flyers sucked so bad last year. They finished with 60 points, but 5 of their 6 top forwards combined to miss the 130 man games.
Oh yeah.
They were, you know, always a like mediocre team, I think you could say, over the last number of years, but they've never been terrible. And I thought they would be better this season, but with Couturier out, you know, for an unknown period of time, I don't think the Flyers can get very far without him. They've got a couple of intriguing players, but it's like a simple approach, right? And once they start playing some of the you know, tougher teams in the league, maybe once the season gets underway a little bit, I don't think the Flyers are going to last as a team that can, you know, win hockey games at any kind of exceedingly high rate, right?
Oh, no way. I mean, considering the divisional matchups, but then even if you look at the West, I mean, obviously, like, the East and West, like they match up, like, during the regular season, but just the overall competitive balance, it's going to be very difficult for me to envision that team being able to keep up on that type of win pace. Now, I want to circle back to the Bruins, because I had this thought come to me in which there are 2 surprises so far with the Boston Bruins that I do think it's worth talking about. And I know Bruin fans would love to hear your thoughts on this. AJ Greer and Jake DeBrusk, those 2 guys have been one of the major surprises in this season so far. Some would even say that Jake DeBrusk has returned back to his rookie season in 2017-18. But what you're seeing now is you're seeing that effort on a nightly basis consistently. You're not asking him to be scorching hot offensively, but you're asking him not to mentally check out. And as well as AJ Greer, in which that we know what he brings offensively. We saw that we had a bit of a preview of that in the preseason, but now he's brought that over into the regular season. What are your thoughts on Jake DeBrusk and AJ Greer's contributions to the Bruins so far, and how has it impacted them in terms of their overall success offensively?
Well, Jake DeBrusk, he was a scorer in junior in the WHL. He was a guy that put up a lot of goals late in his junior career, and obviously the WHL isn't the NHL, and that doesn't always translate. But I think the Bruins thought he was going to be a top line player when they drafted him, and it really looked like he was going to be a third line player at best. But whatever happened last season, whatever was clouding his I guess ability to play at the level that he's played at over the the latter part of last season and the beginning of this season. I don't care. Like he's been great since he's figured it out. I don't know if it was an issue with Cassidy. I've heard that, but I don't necessarily know that I Bleav that, because he was good. Like he was good last season too. So if it was an issue with Cassidy, why did he break out at the end of last season? But I don't know. I think like DeBrusk is a player that can, the book's not out on him yet. Like I don't think anybody can like breathe a sigh of relief. Like, oh, he's made it. He's this unreal top line player now. He's not there yet, but he's definitely improved his trajectory, which was kind of looking pretty flat there the last year or two. But AJ Greer is a really intriguing player. I don't know much about him. And I didn't until I was, reading some stuff over the summer. I read one article from a local Edmonton writer that did, Alan Mitchell, aka Low Tide. He hosts a radio show here in the city, but he's an old school Bruins fan too. So he wrote an article, basically something like the top 10 bargain signings for the Oilers this season, or that the Oilers could consider this season. And midway through that list, or maybe around number 7 or something like that, he had AJ Greer. And I had seen the name, I'd heard a little bit about the player before, but I never really thought too much of it. So I said, I kind of mental note of that. And then it was only a few weeks later that Boston signed him. So then when Boston signed him, I started to look into it and, saw that he had never really had any kind of breakthrough at the NHL level, never really got much of a chance, but just didn't work out in New Jersey and Colorado. But he was putting up good numbers in the American League. He looks to have that sort of diamond in the rough potential, but he's not really a diamond in the rough. He was drafted pretty high, and he's only 25 years old. So, for whatever reason, he never was able to make it in the NHL yet. And it looks like he's already crushed his career best, I Bleav, in goals. So, or doubled it anyway. So, pretty excited, like I said, about him fitting into the bottom 6 and potentially, hopefully the Bruins don't have any injuries this season after the Marchand and McAvoy. That's probably wishful thinking, but hopefully they remain healthy and he never has to go up into the lineup. He can just continue to be a solid presence on that 3rd and 4th line, right?
Oh, absolutely. I don't even think it's wishful thinking, because the Bruins have had some not so fortunate luck in terms of the injury front over the last couple of years. And I hope that after we get through this period of, as we talked about, to near exhaustion in terms of McAvoy and Marchand coming back from their respective injuries, that we don't have another major injury to worry about to any of the key players on the team. Now, with just a couple of minutes left, there's one last question I'll ask you. In terms of Jim Montgomery, the head coach, one of the things I picked up so far is that it just seems like the locker room is really energized. As like they have that look where they finally have breathed a heavy sigh of relief, if you will. And not saying that it's a knock against Cassidy, but we've seen this time and time again in the NHL when a head coach is there for such a long period of time, that the message begins to wear thin. And do you think that the arrival of Jim Montgomery has also been a contributing factor to the Bruins' solid start to the season so far, or do you think that after everything that went on towards the end of last season, in terms of just like the overall picture surrounding Bruce Cassidy and the go back and forth between him and the players, that there's finally a new voice, and that the Bruin players are rejuvenated to have a new voice in the room?
I like Bruce Cassidy as a coach. I think he did. I think he did a bang up job, especially early on when he came aboard. Like the Bruins were kind of, Julian was a great coach too, but the Bruins were kind of in a lull in the last couple of years there, where they weren't really, they were really stuck in that kind of defensive game style, and it just they weren't producing as much as they probably could have been offensively. And then Cassidy came on and really kind of changed the way they played, turned their power play into something that was really, really deadly for a while there.
Oh yeah.
And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. But I think in a way he kind of like capped himself off, or capped the team off in ways. Like he was reluctant to try different things. You find something that, well, okay, we can score roughly 3 goals a game. That's good enough. We'll just stick with this. We will never try to score 3.5 per se, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like there was no evolution with the Bruins game. It's just they got into it and they were becoming really predictable and whatnot. So I think that probably played into it. I know when I watched them last season, a lot of the time, whether it was their rush attempts up the ice, their breakouts, the way they defended, the way they positioned themselves in the offensive zone. I just found a lot of it was predictable, and with so much talent,